Welcome to the 16th Annual Martin Luther King Blessed Are the Peacemakers community event. It is sponsored by the St. Augustine's Episcopal Peace Fellowship of Whidbey Island. For 14 years, over 100 people annually have filled the church nave on the Martin Luther King holiday to both be inspired by the host of witnesses from the 1960s Black Freedom Movement and to be challenged by how far we as a people have fallen short of dealing with America's original sin of slavery. On this Martin Luther King Day, because of a continued uncertainty over the COVID pandemic and large in-person gatherings, the nave of the St. Augustine's Episcopal Church is again empty. Instead, we come to you virtually through this video. In the year 2021, Bob Moses, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee organizer identified with the Mississippi Freedom Summer, passed on to join the heavenly host of the 1960s Nonviolent Black Freedom Activist Movement witnesses. This year also brought local student activism through the United Student Leaders of South Whidbey. These South Whidbey High School students endorsed inclusivity and equity through their support of Black Lives Matter and the LGBTQ rights. The students successfully brought these concerns before the South Whidbey School Board. This year's Blessed Are the Peacemakers program honors Bob Moses and the 1964 Mississippi Freedom Schools, while also recognizing the current South Whidbey student activism. Both the Freedom Schools and South Whidbey student activism for equity and inclusion were and are student-led movements.
While today's student activism for racial justice provides hope, we also learn and are inspired from the past. We begin this Martin Luther King Blessed Are the Peacemakers production by remembering those on whose shoulders we stand, a host of heavenly witnesses who are going marching in.
We're all standing in the footsteps of those who've gone before. We'll all be reunited on that new and sunlit shore. Oh, when the saints go marching in, oh, when the saints go marching in. Oh Lord, I want to be in that number when the saints go marching in. When the sun refused to shine, when the sun refused to shine, oh Lord, I want to be in that number when the saints go marching in. Oh, when the saints go marching in. Oh, when the saints go marching in. Oh Lord, I want to be in that number when the saints go marching in. Now some will say this world of trouble is the only world we'll ever see. But I'm waiting for that moment when the new world is revealed. Oh, when the saints go marching in. Oh, when the saints go marching in. Oh, Lord, I want to be in that number when the saints go marching in. And on that hallelujah day, and on that hallelujah day, oh, Lord, I want to be in that number on that hallelujah day. Oh, when the saints go marching in. Oh, when the saints go marching in, oh Lord, I want to be in that number. When the saints go marching in, Lord, I want to be in that number. When the saints go marching in.
Unlike the other student nonviolent coordinating committee activists, Bob Moses was neither born nor raised in the South under Jim Crow. He was born and raised in Harlem. His father was a janitor, but he attended Stuyvesant High School, a prestigious New York City public school. He received a master's degree from Harvard and was attending Harvard working toward a PhD in philosophy when the death of his mother and the ensuing mental instability of his father caused Bob to withdraw from Harvard and take a position as a high school math teacher in the New York City public school system. The Montgomery bus boycott, the Nashville and Greensboro student sit-ins, as well as the witness of Martin Luther King, had a strong impact on him. He decided to help with the movement during his summer vacation from teaching.
In June of 1960, 25-year-old Moses went to Atlanta, where he presented himself at the Southern Christian Leadership Council headquarters, which was a room in Atlanta's Ebenezer Baptist Church, where King served as pastor. King was out of town. There was no specific assignment for him until Ella Baker suggested he might go to Mississippi, where an NAACP leader, Amzie Moore, was requesting help with voter registration.
Ella was the administrator for the fledgling Southern Christian Leadership Council, but she encouraged the student activists, among them John Lewis and Diane Nash, to organize separately from King's preacher-led SCLC. She is known as the mother of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, commonly referred to as SNCC.
Moses went to Mississippi, where he got along well with Amzie and had a productive summer. He promised to return to Mississippi the following summer. Amzie suggested that while recruiting youth from Mississippi was laudable, it would be better for SNCC to send northern students into Mississippi to register voters.
Moses wrote back to Atlanta, Amzie thinks, and I concur, the adults here will back the young folk, but will never initiate a program strong enough to do what needs to be done. The main thrust is to take place next summer. No starry-eyed, these are nasty jobs, but we're going to need some nasty people to do them. So put me down, because I'm not only getting nasty, I'm getting downright nasty.
The next summer, Moses left teaching permanently and returned to Mississippi. In leaving a secure teaching career, he was now committed to the movement. He was joining SNCC members, among them John Lewis, Diane Nash, Jane Stenberg, Bernard Lafayette, James Bevel, Marion Barry, Stokely Carmichael, who left college behind to permanently join the movement.
If you miss me from the back of the bus and you can't find me nowhere, come on up to the front of the bus. I'll be riding up there. I'll be riding up there. I'll be riding up there. Come on up miss me from the picket lines and you can't find me nowhere, come on down to the jailhouse. I'll be rooming right there. I'll be rooming right there. I'll be rooming right there. Come on down to the jailhouse. I'll be rooming right there. Well, if you miss me from the front of the bus and you can't find me nowhere, come on up to the driver's seat. I'll be driving right there. I'll be driving right there. I'll be driving right there. Come on up to the driver's seat. I'll be driving right there. Well, if you miss me from the cotton fields and you can't find me nowhere, just come on up to Congress and I'll be working right there. I'll be working right there. I'll be working right there. Come on up to Congress and I'll be leading right there.
Bob Moses began his Mississippi voting rights campaign in southwest Mississippi city of Macomb. He soon experienced a violent Mississippi welcome. Walking with two prospective black voter registrants on their way to the county courthouse, the sidewalk was suddenly blocked by three young white males. Two of them, relatives of the county sheriff. Asked where he was going, Moses responded, to the courthouse. He was then struck by the handle of a knife and a severe beating commenced. Moses, true to the nonviolent training, did not offer resistance. During the beating, he had a mystical experience.
He felt himself separate from his body, floating about 10 feet above the sidewalk, where he watched the attack on himself without pain. He saw his face being forced to the pavement with another blow to his head. When the assailants left, Moses realized he could still function. It was imperative that he continue to the courthouse.
We've got to go to the registrar. We can't let something like this stop us. That's the whole point.
Mississippi in 1961 was a police state, with white citizens' councils controlling local politics, enforcing white supremacy. The county voting registrar made certain that only a few token property-only blacks could vote. Voting registration required reading, interpreting complex clauses from the Mississippi State Constitution. The county registrar had unlimited, arbitrary authority to decide whether an item in the Mississippi State Constitution was properly interpreted. Additionally, there was the threat of violence and economic retaliation if a black person dared to attempt to register to vote. The names of the individuals registering to vote were listed in the local papers. White registrants were listed with the title of Mr., Miss, Mrs., while black applicants were listed without title. For example, Willie Smith. This made it easy to impose economic or physical retribution on black voter registrants. Given these circumstances, it's remarkable that Moses was able to establish a SNCC voter registration presence in Mississippi, a state that in terms of race relations had changed very little from the days of slavery.
Most black Mississippians had accepted or at least acquiesced in being excluded from the political process. Going to the courthouse was dangerous. It was a fool's errand.
This was the atmosphere in which Bob Moses began to hold workshops to prepare for and encourage voter registration. Through his quiet demeanor, he managed to give SNCC a foothold in Mississippi.
Mississippi voter registration drives, developed under Moses, were a different approach from the SNCC sit-ins and freedom rides. His approach was to identify with the Mississippi African American sharecropper and gain his or her trust, to empower sharecroppers.
Moses always wore the farmers' denim overalls. He listened to their concerns. He spoke very softly, slowly, and respectfully with the unlettered sharecroppers. Through his quiet demeanor, Moses prepared them for voting and installed, through trust, the courage to accompany him to the courthouse.
SNCC was now drawing its philosophy and tactics from the bottom up, identifying with sharecroppers. It was slow work. A 44-year-old sharecropper, Fannie Lou Hamer, is the best example of the SNCC approach. She was the youngest of 20 children and had been raised in the Mississippi Delta. She had been unaware that African Americans could vote. That was white people's business. But when she heard Bob Moses call for people to register to vote, she volunteered. Fannie Lou figured there was no reason to be scared.
The only thing they could do to me was kill me, and it seemed like they'd been trying to do that a little bit at a time ever since I could remember.
Fannie Lou Hamer appeared before the Credentials Committee at the 1964 Democratic Convention. She was a delegate for the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party, challenging the regular, all-white Mississippi delegation. She testified about the consequences of registering to vote.
My husband came and said the plantation owner was raising Cain because I had tried to register. And before he quit talking, the plantation owner came and said, "Fannie Lou, do you know, if you don't go down and withdraw your registration, you will have to leave." And I address him and I say, "I didn't try to register for you. I tried to register for myself." On the 10th of September, 1962, 16 bullets was fired into the home of Mr. and Mrs. Robert Tucker for me. That same night, 2 girls were shot in Rulesville, Mississippi.
Fannie Lou Hamer became a hero of the movement. This lady, with her 6th grade education, became SNCC's most effective campus recruiter and fundraiser. She was known for her Christian faith and gospel singing. She also paid her dues, being beaten and spending time behind bars for simply attempting to register to vote or assisting others to voter registration.
This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, oh, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. We've got the light of freedom, we're gonna let it shine. We've got the light of freedom, we're gonna let it shine. We've got the light of freedom, we're gonna let it it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. In the voting booth, we're gonna let it shine. In the voting booth, we're gonna let it shine. In the voting booth, we're gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. We're gonna teach the truth, we're gonna let it shine. Oh, we're gonna teach the truth, we're gonna let it shine. We're gonna teach the truth, we're gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. This little light of mine, oh, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.
To inspire and educate rural African American Mississippians to vote, Moses developed a mock election. The Freedom Vote election was held in November 1963. Freedom Vote was managed primarily by Southern Black SNCC volunteers, but also had the assistance from 100 Northern white college students. 80,000 Mississippians voted in this symbolic election.
The most significant result of Freedom Vote was that for the first time, it took the movement beyond activities affecting a single town, county, municipality, or electoral district and placed us in the area of a statewide organization. Mike Thelwell, SNCC worker.
Moses had come to the consideration that localized voter registration activities would not work in Mississippi's violent, racist society. He also knew that the mass marches, civil disobedience used effectively by Martin Luther King in Birmingham and Salem would not work in Mississippi. However, the use of white students in the Freedom Vote had resulted in a minimum of assaults against SNCC workers.
The use of white middle-class students would attract attention from the national media and the Justice Department, attention never afforded to the Black SNCC volunteers. A momentous decision was made by SNCC in the spring of 1964. White college students would be recruited to assist with the Mississippi Project planned for the summer. Black and white together would overcome. 1,000 mostly white college students, volunteers, were trained to supplement the Black SNCC workers. SNCC volunteers would operate freedom schools and help register voters. The Mississippi Project became better known as Freedom Summer.
Training of white Northern volunteers for Freedom Summer began in June on college campuses. There was apprehension, fear, and idealism expressed in letters from Oxford, Ohio. where the Northern volunteers were being trained for violent, repressive Mississippi society. During their training, 3 civil rights workers, James Chaney, Andrew Goodman, and Michael Schwerner, were murdered, lynched near Philadelphia, Mississippi.
Listen carefully to the reading of letters sent by white college volunteers, first-hand accounts sent to friends and family in the North. They express both idealism and apprehension about the upcoming Mississippi experience.
Dear people at home in the safe North, Mississippi is going to be held this summer. Monday, Jim Foreman, Executive Secretary of SNCC, stood up during one of the general sessions and calmly told the staff, who already knew, and the volunteers that they could all expect to be arrested, jailed, and beaten this summer, and in many cases shot at. There's a quiet Negro fellow on the staff who has an ugly scar on his neck and another on his shoulder where he stopped 45 slugs. I'd venture to say that every member of the Mississippi staff has been beaten up at least once, and he who has not been shot is rare. It is impossible for you to imagine what we are going into, as it is for me now, but I'm beginning to see. Please talk up Mississippi up north, pass around the materials I am sending, and begin petitioning the federal government for intervention. Love, Extoff.
Dear Mommy and Daddy and Tony, we've been told over and over again of brutality and beating and murder. Hank says none of us really believe it inside. We probably each feel we have a lucky charm which will give us a halo of sanctity. I think we do. Part of it is the nonviolent philosophy, especially the part I now understand which I didn't before. That is the part that teaches you to love your enemy, how to feel true compassion for the cop who is using a cattle prod on you, how to understand him as a human being caught in a predicament not of his own making. When I came, I thought Martin Luther King and his love your enemy was a lot of Christian mysticism. Now I can see it as a force and support, helping those who understand it. It makes me think that maybe I can take what is coming this summer. Love, Judy.
The Freedom Schools were designed to do more than just teach basic literacy. They operated as an alternative school, teaching Black history and civics, subjects not taught in Mississippi public schools.
The students are taught nothing of their heritage. The only outstanding Negroes they are told about are Booker T. Washington and George Washington Carver. They learn nothing of the contributions Negroes have made to our culture or anything else which could give them any reason to disbelieve the lies they are told about Negroes being unable to do anything worthwhile. Letter from Hattiesburg, Mississippi. All this week, we have been working on curriculum, schedules, registration of students, and assembling materials for the Freedom Schools at Hattiesburg. It became evident quite early that we were going to get many more than the expected 75 students. On registration day, however, we had a totally unexpected deluge. 600 students. They were expecting only 700 for the entire state.
White Mississippians didn't like the Freedom Schools. They threatened parents who let their children attend, harassed the teachers, and sometimes destroyed the schools. A Freedom Summer teacher writes of her teaching experience at Gluckstadt Freedom School.
Gluckstadt Freedom School, Monday, July 20th. First day of school. A student was assigned to report on civil rights news for the next few days. I asked one of the students to read an excerpt from a speech by Frederick Douglass. I asked 3 others to read aloud poems by Langston Hughes. When we finished, Arthur asked if he could take the Langston Hughes book home overnight. Wednesday, July 22nd. Discuss the origin of slavery in America, slave revolts, Negroes in the American Revolution, mutiny on the Amistad. Thursday, July 23rd. Review some myths about Negroes, asking students to give reasons why each was false. Some tried to defend them. Friday, July 24th. Lectured on the Reconstruction period. discussed the Civil Rights Act of 1875. The big hit of the day was the poetry of Langston Hughes. Tuesday, August 11th. Gluckstadt Freedom School burned to the ground late last night. There is little doubt of the cause of the fire. We start tomorrow to raise money to rebuild the building.
During Freedom Summer, 35 churches were burned or bombed. Most of these churches house freedom schools.
There were two main components to the Mississippi Summer Project: the establishment of freedom schools and voter registration. Freedom schools had two explicit goals. One was to provide students with remedial education based on the known fact that the quality of their education in the segregated public schools was grossly inadequate. The other goal was to teach the kids Black history. It is comforting to think that we did a good job that summer, but we did not bring freedom to Mississippi, nor did we teach freedom. It was already there in the hearts and minds of our students, their parents, and every other African American resident of the state. All that was needed for it to flourish openly was the feeling that it could be expressed safely, and just our presence gave them that. They took it from there, and have begun to make a better world. Wallace Roberts.
What did Freedom Summer accomplish? The Reverend Ed King, a white Mississippi Methodist pastor who worked with SNCC in organizing the Mississippi, summed up on the efforts of the Mississippi Freedom Summer.
The summer program greatly changed Mississippi and the life of both the people who love her, Negro and white, and the lives of those who came to help us. Ed King.
Another king, Martin Luther King, at a citizens' hearing on Mississippi attended by movement leaders, defended the Mississippi Project as the most creative idea in the movement.
A bottom-up leadership became the SNCC's operative strategy, especially in Mississippi. Bob Moses best exemplified this approach. The movement historian Taylor Branch stated that in terms of movement influence, Bob Moses was nearly on a par with Martin Luther King. Wow. Listen to the words of Moses on bottom-up leadership.
Leadership is there in the people. You don't have to worry about that. You don't have to worry about where your leaders are, how we are going to get leaders. Leadership is there. If you go out and work with your people, then leadership will emerge. We don't know who they are now. We don't need to know. But leadership will emerge from the movement that emerges.
True to the bottom-up philosophy he espoused, Moses resigned as director following the Mississippi Freedom Summer. He said his position had become too strong, too central, so that people who did not need to began to lean on me, to use me as a crutch. His dilemma maintaining a balance between moral purity and political effectiveness.
Freedom Summer, through bottom-up, on-the-ground organizing, exposed the racism in Mississippi and denial of suffrage to African Americans. However, it didn't create the hoped-for conflagration that could lead to a national response to voter suppression. That would come in Selma.
How long? Not long. How long? Because you shall reap what you sow. How long? Not long. How long? Truth forever on the scaffold, wrong forever on the throne. Yes, that scaffold sways the future. Behind the dim unknown standeth God within the shadow, keeping watch above his own. How long? Not long. Because the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice. How long? Not long. Because mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. He's trampling out the vintage where the grapes of wrath are stored. He's loosed the fateful lightning of his terrible swift sword. His truth is marching on. He has sounded forth the trumpet that shall never call retreat. He is sifting out the hearts of men before his judgment seat. Oh, be swift, my soul, to answer him. Be jubilant, my feet. Our God is marching on. Glory, hallelujah. Glory, hallelujah. Glory, hallelujah. Glory, hallelujah. His truth is marching on.
Reverend Ed King, a white Methodist pastor, was a key figure in the Mississippi campaigns. He worked with SNCC and Bob Moses during the Mississippi Summer Project. Ed was an organizer of the 1963 Jackson, Mississippi Woolworth's lunch counter sit-in. He practiced and preached nonviolent direct action, even after his home was shot into, after almost being killed when his car was run off the road, and after his friend Medgar Evers was killed in his driveway. Such violence did not stop the movement. Voter registration, direct action, and civil disobedience continues, always with the involvement of students willing to take risks. After the court-ordered integration of public schools, many were still run by resentful whites who wanted the teaching of history that ignored past realities. Reverend King and students across the state fought for students' rights, academic freedom, and the teaching of the true history, a history that recognizes a multicultural, multi-race history of America, a history we need to learn from.
Tougaloo was dedicated to not just educating, but also what seems to me an experiment in democracy.
You had faculty like John Salter. He challenged his students to think about what are some of the social problems that we must contend with. How are you going to change them?
We decided we would do the sit-in at the Woolworth's lunch counter.
Now Woolworth was what we called a five and dime. Think dollar store with a food court.
They sold hot dogs and hamburgers.
Everyone shopped at a five and dime. Everyone could afford it. And to not be welcomed as a customer at this one part of the store, the lunch counter, that was morally and legally indefensible. Ann Moody, Perlina, and Memphis Norman, all of whom were Tougaloo students, were going to sit at the counter. And then there was going to be a diversionary sort of picket line down the street. The idea, I think, being that the picket line would divert the police attention while people got seated.
They would be a decoy, and they became the most photographed sit-in in the history of the sit-in movement.
Lois Chafee, who was the house mother, though she was only a year or two older than us at most, she and I were going to be the spotters for the picket line. We would call back to Medgar Evers' office and give a report periodically. Well, the picket line got arrested right away, so we decided we'd just go down and see what was happening. And basically what was happening was all hell was breaking loose.
This was the lunch hour. So students at Central High School had a lunch break, and it was just a few blocks away, so they walked over. This is a very conflicting scene.
I conferred with Ed King, who was the spotter, about should I sit down? And yes, I should. And then Annie and I got pulled off our stools and drug up to the front of the store.
It was very theatrical.
The main weapons were whatever was sitting on the counter. And I mean, this is everything from vinegar to pepper to sugar to sometimes a fist.
At the end of the day, it's about humiliating people. It's to bring a person to their knees psychologically.
The Supreme Court had ruled, I think the week before, that the police of their own initiative could not come into a store to make arrests. The store had to be closed by the manager, and they thought this was just real funny, these police did.
Memphis Norman was thrown to the floor, kicked, beaten, unconscious, blood coming out his nose, mouth. Medgar said, well, should we call it off?
We were committed to sitting there. When it got really looking like we might not make it out of there, I had sort of an out-of-body experience. Your real self just sort of leaves, departs. Surreal, you might say, but I think it's survival. And at that point, survival was in doubt, yeah.
The pictures were shown around the world. By the next day, there are people volunteering, ready to do things. Suddenly we were visible.
I mean, this is not to take away from King, but to reduce the civil rights movement to Rosa Parks and Dr. King makes everyday folks like you and me look like we can't do anything except follow. The students today have to see that they can identify their cause and go change the world. And us old folks, now our role is to have their back.
However, whether it was direct civil disobedience actions or voter registration, students were then and are now a key element in calling for racial justice.
Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. I'm gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, marching up to freedom land. Ain't gonna let discrimination turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let discrimination turn me around. Gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, marching up to freedom land. Ain't gonna let redlining turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let redlining turn me around. Gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, marching up to freedom land. Ain't gonna let no police force turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let no police force turn me around. Gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, marching up to freedom land. Ain't gonna let voter suppression turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let voter suppression turn me around. Gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, marching up to freedom land. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. I'm gonna keep on walking, keep on talking, marching up to freedom's land.
In 2020, the murders of unarmed African Americans by police and armed white vigilantes resulted in an interracial flood of millions, primarily youth, taking to the streets, demonstrating in large cities, but also in small towns, including those on Whidbey Island.
On South Whidbey, activist progressive high school students organized as the United Student Leaders, USL. Their protest began with climate change, but after George Floyd, it intersected with Black Lives Matter. The secular United Student Leaders used the nonviolent protest tactics in a way similar to the faith-based SNCC students of the 1960s. SNCC students underwent Gandhian and Christian nonviolence training. The USL goals developed under the secular approach of intersectionality. Both faith-based and secular sought a version of the beloved community.
Hi, I'm Jackson Murphy. I'm a member of United Student Leaders and Dismantling Systemic Racism Advisory Committee for the City of Langley. And we are so happy to be a part of this and share what we've already done and impacts that we have had on our community. And just first, we wanted to give a little bit of background on USL. USL started 2.5 years ago and focused solely on climate change, protesting in front of Chase and Wells Fargo as they're the biggest investors in the fossil fuel industry. But we saw the effects of racism and other forms of oppression in our country, and we couldn't just focus on climate anymore. And we started our racial social justice work about 1.5 years ago, and I was brought in and joined USL to help with their Transforming Education campaign. And I saw just a lack of BIPOC history education and a lot of hate speech at the school, and just mishandling of racial issues. And we wrote a letter to the school district asking for a new ethnic studies class, environmental science class, comprehensive sex ed, and increased student voice. From that letter, we got monthly meetings with the school district, administrators and other staff, and many of our members were invited to serve on district committees and give our opinions. And during this time, many community members were also pushing for some of the same things we were, and a Black Lives Matter banner was put up in front of the high school, which was really cool. And later that year, when the school board was about to approve the 2 new classes, we wrote another letter refreshing our support, and that got 481 signatures, so even better than our first letter. And these classes were approved, and this year, a new ethnic studies class and environmental science class are now courses at the high school. And the ethnic studies class is a required class for freshmen. And over the next months, so that the approval of the classes was last winter, and so in the spring, we raised many issues in our monthly meetings with the district around hate speech, just reviewing curriculum, training teachers, other equity and anti-racism, gender to bathrooms, dress code, so much. And then in June, we had a challenge with some community members. Some community members were upset with some of the changes the school district was making toward greater equity, and planned to protest what they called critical race theory and comprehensive sex ed. And the Black Lives Matter banner was stolen about a week before that. And we quickly planned a counter protest to support our school's actions and the banner they displayed. And we got several groups to spread the word, and we got 360 people to show up, which was amazing for an in-person action, especially because 150 of them were students when school was still online. So that was amazing. And the original protest got like 40 to 80, but there wasn't an exact count. And this fall, there was 3 school board positions up for election, and 3 far-right candidates were put forth, and absolutely crushed by the board members up for re-election by 70 to 30% of the votes, and ensuring the continuation of equity work in the district.
My name's Naomi, and I'm a member of USL and also ASB at the South Whidbey High School. Intersectionality is the understanding that systems of power and oppression do not operate independently and separately from one another. Because of this, there are many people whose social identities overlap to create compounding experiences of discrimination. In order to truly understand racism and take steps towards eliminating it, we must acknowledge intersectionality.
My name is Tori Green, and I am a USL member and a student at South Whidbey High School. Racism and classism. Intersectionality is an incredibly complex system of overlapping identities, and it is impossible to address all the various aspects in such a short amount of time. But I hope that this has helped you have a little better of an understanding. Touching on the connections between race and class. Discrimination against Black people. It's important to recognize systemic racism as the root cause of wealth disparities between white people and people of color. Anti-Black policies dating back to slavery continue to reduce Black Americans' upward economic mobility. Employment discrimination, the prison pipeline, and many other factors contribute to Black households having less wealth, fewer assets, and greater debt. Low household income can prevent young Black people from receiving a college education, which perpetuates the issue. As with other intersectional issues, it is impossible to eliminate class issues without addressing systemic racism.
Now I'm going to talk about how racial discrimination and the climate crisis are connected. First topic we have is colonialism. Climate change is caused by the exploitation and degradation of our planet and its people, which is the foundational principle of colonialism. With the expansion of European colonization came the extraction of natural resources from lands that were stolen from the indigenous peoples. Indigenous cultures share a deep respect for the earth that was completely disregarded by colonizers. Their land management practices were destroyed with the commercialization of agriculture, and ever since, we have been in a cycle of taking and taking. Indigenous people are now leading the fight against climate change, but even today, their voices are still going unheard by the big corporations building pipelines and otherwise desecrating indigenous land. Another important topic is slavery. There is known to be a significant connection between slavery and the climate crisis that is often overlooked. A quote from Elizabeth Yen Pierre summed that connection up really well. She said, "With the arrival of slavery came repurposing of the land, chopping down the trees, and disrupting water systems and other ecological relationships, all to support the effort of building a capitalist society and provide resources for the privileged, using the bodies of Black people to facilitate that." The fight against racial injustice and climate change are deeply intertwined, and it's impossible to make progress on one issue without also addressing the other.
Youth in Mississippi were, and today's South Whidbey students are, the driving force for a racial reckoning, for a beloved community. This dream of and hope for a beloved community was expressed best by a 35-year-old preacher.
I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day, even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today. Down in Alabama, with its vicious racists, with its governor having his lips dripping with the words of interposition and nullification. One day right there in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted, and every hill and mountain shall be made low. The rough places will be made plain, and the crooked places will be made straight. And the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together. This is our hope. This is a faith that I go back to the South with. With this faith, we will be able to hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope. With this faith, we will be able to transform the jangling discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. With this faith, we will be able to work together, to pray together, to struggle together, to go to jail together, to stand up for freedom together, knowing that we will be free one day. This will be the day. This will be the day when all of God's children will be able to sing with new meaning, "My country, tears of thee. Sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride. From every mountainside, let freedom ring. And if America is to be a great nation, this must become true. And so let freedom ring. Let freedom ring from every hill and molehill of Mississippi, from every mountainside. Let freedom ring, and when this happens, when we allow freedom ring, when we let it ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, "Free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last."
America is still inspired by the preacher's dream, but the road is jagged. Sometimes we feel we've been in the storm too long. But John Lewis has left us with the words of wisdom and hope. We've come so far. We have made too much progress as a people to stand still or to slip back. When I was growing up, there was a song that people would sing in the church. "I'm so glad trouble don't last always. Oh my Lord, oh my Lord." You have to believe that. You have to believe in it. It's all going to work out.
Well, you know that I'm so glad. I know the trouble don't last always. Oh, I'm so glad. I know trouble don't last always. Now, Lord, I'm so glad. Lord, I know that trouble don't last always. Now, oh my Lord, wanna know what shall I do? You better run, 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 oh sinner, run. You better find a hiding place. You better run, run, sinner, run. You better find you a hiding place. Oh, run, sinner, run. Sinner, run, you better find you a hiding place. Oh, my Lord, yeah, Lord, what shall I do? I'm so glad, Lord, I know the trouble don't last always. Oh, I'm so glad, my hidden trouble is all soon go away. I'm so glad, I know the trouble don't last always. Now, oh my Lord, I wanna know what shall I do? Well, I'm getting worried, what shall I do? Getting tired, Lord, what can I do? I'm getting worried, what can I do? You promised me, Jesus, you'd be beside me. You promised me, Lord, you'd bring me out of trouble. You promised me, Lord, you'd be my friend now. You promised me, Lord, you stay right beside me. I'm so glad, I got religion, Lord, anytime. Oh, I'm so glad I got religion, and I'm so glad I got religion anytime. Oh my Lord, I wanna know what shall I do? Well, soon one morning, you know, when death come creeping in my room. Oh, soon one morning I'll be tried. No, soon one morning, soon, you know, when death comes creeping in my room. Now, oh my Lord, what shall I do? What shall I do?